My sister accidentally called me while my family mocked me. Just add $250 more to her rent. She's too desperate to say no. Mom laughed. I was working 2 jobs. When I told them I knew, my brother said, "So what? You're just a backup plan." I left. 2 days later, I got an urgent call from the hospital. My mom had listed me as the only contact. I was exhausted. My shift at the bookstore had stretched longer than expected because the manager decided at the last minute that we needed to reorganize the entire front display. I had spent the past 2 hours lugging around stacks of hardcovers, and my back ached as I finally clocked out. I had about 3 hours before I had to be at the diner, just enough time to get home, shower, and maybe eat something before another long night. I didn't complain. Complaining wouldn't change anything. This was just my life now: work, sleep, pay bills, repeat. My phone vibrated as I stepped out into the cool evening air. I pulled it from my pocket without much thought, assuming it was another automated message from my bank reminding me about my negative balance. But it wasn't. It was my sister, Jenna. That alone was odd. Jenna rarely called me. If she needed something, she texted, and usually only when her mother told her to. The last time I had actually spoken to her on the phone was months ago when she needed someone to pick up her son from school. So why was she calling now? I swiped to answer. "Hello." There was no response. At first, I thought maybe the call had dropped, but then I heard it: muffled voices, clinking glass, laughter, the unmistakable sounds of a dinner gathering. "Just add $250 more to her rent," a voice said. I froze. That was my mother's voice. "She's too desperate to say no," she added with a chuckle. The voices grew clearer as I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. "She barely makes rent now," Jenna said, her tone light, amused. "I had to spot her for groceries last month, remember?" "Well, she pays eventually," my brother Ryan chimed in. "She's like a little worker ant. Just keep going, no matter what we throw at her." I couldn't breathe. "She actually had the nerve to ask if she could pay me late last time," Ryan continued, snorting. "Like, it's not my problem she works 2 jobs and still can't make it. Maybe if she had an actual career instead of stocking books and waiting tables," Jenna mused. "Oh, please," Mom cut in, laughing again. "She'll never do better. She's stuck. Just make her pay more. She'll never fight back. She's always been too desperate." I don't remember hanging up. I just remember standing there on the sidewalk, the world tilting around me. I was shaking, not just from anger, but from something deeper, something uglier. A realization. They didn't respect me. The people I had sacrificed for, who I had bent over backward to help. Paying bills when Mom came up short, taking Ryan's calls when he needed quick cash, watching Jenna's son for free so she could go on weekend trips with her boyfriend. They saw me as nothing more than a resource. Worse, they were laughing about it, mocking me, and I had been so blind. I'd spent years assuming that if I just worked hard enough, if I just gave a little more, they would finally treat me like I mattered, like I was part of the family. But I was never part of it, was I? Not really. I was just useful. Something inside me cracked. By the time I got home, I had made up my mind. I wasn't doing this anymore. I sat on my couch in silence, staring at the blank wall in front of me. My tiny apartment, which I had been struggling to hold onto for years, suddenly felt foreign. Like a cage I had locked myself in. No more. The next morning, I called my landlord. "How soon can I break my lease?" I asked, gripping the phone tightly. He hesitated. "Are you in trouble?" I exhaled slowly. "No, I just can't keep living here. I'd have to check, but I might be able to work something out. If you need to leave sooner rather than later, let me know." Next, I made another call. Ryan picked up after the third ring. "Yeah, I'm moving out," I said flatly. He let out a breathy chuckle. "Yeah, okay. And where exactly do you think you're going?" "Somewhere that isn't here," I said. "I'll drop off my last rent payment in cash by the end of the week. After that, don't contact me again." There was a long silence. Then, finally, he scoffed. "You're being dramatic." "No, Ryan," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I just finally heard what you all really think of me." I hung up before he could respond. The text started pouring in within the hour. "Jenna, you're really overreacting. It was just a joke. Mom, don't be selfish. We've always counted on you. Ryan, you'll be back when you run out of money." I ignored all of them. For the first time in years, I wasn't answering their calls. I wasn't sending the money. I wasn't bending over backward to prove my worth. I was done, or so I thought. 2 days later, I was halfway through packing when my phone rang again. A number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me check the transcript. Hospital. Emergency contact. My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my pulse thudding in my ears. She had put me down as her emergency contact. I don't know why that surprised me. Of course, she had. Who else would she list? Jenna? Ryan? They weren't reliable. They never had been. I clenched my jaw and answered. "Is this a relative of Margaret West?" a voice asked. I swallowed hard. "Yes, I'm her daughter. She was admitted this morning with chest pain. We're running tests, but it may have been a mild heart attack." I let out a slow breath. "Can I see her?" "She's conscious now, but we typically only allow immediate family." "I am immediate family," I said. There was a pause. Then the nurse sighed. You can come by any time. I sat there for a long time after the call ended, staring down at my phone. For years, I had been waiting for a sign, something to tell me whether I was making the right choice by walking away. And now, at the very moment I was finally free, here it was, a test, a chance to see if I was really strong enough to leave. I grabbed my keys, and I went to the hospital. I drove in silence, my fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. The streets were nearly empty, the glow of streetlights casting long, flickering shadows over the pavement. The hospital wasn't far, but the drive felt endless. My mind raced, looping through every conversation, every sacrifice, every moment I had convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, if I tried harder, I could make them love me. And now, my mother was in a hospital bed, and I was the only one they called. The sliding doors of the emergency entrance hissed open as I stepped inside. The scent of disinfectant and something metallic clung to the air, the kind of sterile, lifeless smell that hospitals always carried. The front desk nurse barely glanced up from her computer. "I'm here for Margaret West," I said, my voice coming out steadier than I expected. She typed something, then nodded toward the hallway. "Room 214, down the hall to your left." I walked slowly, my footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. With each step, an old memory surfaced. Mom held my hand on my first day of school, promising I'd make friends. Mom looked away when Ryan and Jenna teased me at the dinner table, pretending not to hear. Mom called me when she needed money, but never just to talk. I reached the door and hesitated. Then I stepped inside. She looked smaller than I remembered. The harsh white sheets swallowed her, and her face, usually so sharp with judgment, was pale and drawn. Her eyes flickered open, landing on me. "I knew you'd come," she murmured, her voice raspy. "Now I'm glad you came." "No, I'm sorry. I knew you'd come. Because of course I would. Because I always did." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "What happened?" She sighed, shifting slightly. "The doctors think it was a mild heart attack. Stress, maybe. They don't know yet." I studied her face, looking for something, remorse, gratitude, anything. But all I saw was exhaustion. "Jenna and Ryan?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She exhaled sharply, annoyed. "They were here earlier." I glanced at the bedside table. No flowers. No cards. No signs that either of them had stayed long. Of course they hadn't. They never had to. That was my job. "You shouldn't have listed me as your only contact," I said finally. She frowned, as if the idea had never even crossed her mind. "Who else would I list?" I let out a breath of laughter, humorless and bitter. "Right. Who else?" A tense silence filled the room. Then, she said, "I need you to stay with me for a few days. Just until I get discharged. Not if you can. Not would you mind? Just I need you to." I stared at her, my body rigid, my nails digging into my palms. She didn't understand. She never had. I was supposed to drop everything, move in her home, cook, clean, take care of her, just like always. Just like she knew I would. But I wasn't the same person I was 2 days ago. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I could do it. I wasn't sure if I wanted to. I stood there for a long moment, staring at her. The weight of her words pressed down on me, the same way they always had. "I need you to stay with me for a few days." Not a question, not a request, a statement, a demand. It was the same voice she had used my entire life, the same expectation behind it. Like it was obvious that I would drop everything and take care of her, because I always had. I swallowed the sharp response that burned the back of my throat and pulled the chair closer to the bed. My legs felt unsteady as I sat down. "You're quiet," she muttered, adjusting the hospital blanket around her shoulders. "I figured you'd be more concerned." Concerned? I had spent my entire life concerned about her. I had spent nights worried about how I'd cover the extra bills she suddenly forgot about. I had sacrificed my savings to keep the lights on in her house, while she guilted me into believing that was just what daughters did. Now she wanted me to stay with her. I ran a hand over my face. "Mom, I have a job. I have bills. I can't just take days off." She scoffed, as if I had said something ridiculous. "Oh, don't start with that. You work in a diner and a bookstore. It's not like they can't find someone else to cover for you." Her words stung in a way I hadn't expected. I didn't love my job, but I worked hard. I pushed myself every day just to survive. But to her, to my entire family, my struggles had always been trivial. I let out a slow breath. "I don't have the kind of job where I can just take off whenever I want." She sighed, exasperated. "Fine. Just come by before and after your shifts. Make sure I have food. Help me get around until I'm better. It's not a big deal." Of course, to her, it wasn't a big deal. She had never thought about how much she asked of me. It had never mattered how exhausted I was, how much I was barely holding myself together. I looked at her, really looked at her. She was thinner than I remembered, her face drawn, her hands resting weakly against the blankets. A part of me, the part that had spent a lifetime craving her approval, wanted to push everything aside and help her. But another part of me, the part that had heard her laughing about me just days ago, was screaming at me to walk away. She shifted against the pillows, her expression growing irritated when I didn't immediately agree. Honestly, I don't understand why you're hesitating. You act like I'm asking you to do something outrageous. I'm your mother. I pressed my lips together. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I know, I said finally. It was all I could say. She studied me, her eyes narrowing. You're upset. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Yeah, I guess you could say that. She huffed. Is this about the rent? Because if it is, you're being dramatic. You know I don't have extra money lying around. And Ryan, this isn't about the rent. I cut in. My voice was sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. Her mouth shut, her eyes flickering with something. Annoyance? Realization? She adjusted the blanket again. Then what's the problem? I stared at her waiting for her to acknowledge it, waiting for her to admit that she knew exactly why I was upset. But she didn't. Of course she didn't. Because she didn't think she had done anything wrong. The weight in my chest grew heavier. I need to get back to work, I said, standing up. Her forehead creased. You just got here. I grabbed my bag and slung it over my shoulder. I'll check in later. Her lips parted, like she wanted to say something, but for once, she didn't argue. I walked out without looking back. The drive home was a blur. My head was pounding, my stomach twisting in knots. I should have expected this. Of course, she wasn't going to apologize. Of course, she wasn't going to acknowledge what she had said, how she had laughed at my struggles, how she had let Ryan and Jenna treat me like a joke. But still, some stupid, wounded part of me had hoped. I pulled into my apartment complex and sat in the car for a while, gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers ached. What was I supposed to do now? I knew if I went back to the hospital, it would start all over again. I'd take care of her. I'd run errands, cook meals, and make sure she had everything she needed. And then, when she got better, she'd go right back to treating me like an afterthought. I squeezed my eyes shut. For the first time in my life, I'd been ready to walk away. I had been ready to put myself first. But now I felt like I was being pulled right back into the same trap I had spent years trying to escape. And I didn't know if I was strong enough to resist. I sat in my car for what felt like forever, the hum of the engine filling the silence. My mind was a mess, rage, guilt, exhaustion, all tangled together so tightly I didn't know where one ended and the other began. I should have just told her the truth. I should have looked her in the eye and said, I heard you. I heard all of you. And I'm done being your backup plan. But I didn't. I had stood there, waiting for something, an acknowledgement, an apology, anything, and instead, she had brushed it off like it was nothing. Because to her, it was nothing. The worst part was, I could already see how this was going to go. I tell myself I wouldn't get involved, that I wouldn't fall back into my old role. I tell myself I wasn't going to be the one holding everything together again. And then I'd do it anyway, because that's who I was. I took a deep breath, forcing my hands to unclench from the steering wheel. The apartment was dark when I stepped inside, the familiar silence wrapping around me like a heavy blanket. I tossed my keys onto the counter and sank onto the couch, pressing my palms against my face. I needed sleep. I needed to think. Instead, I lay there, staring at the ceiling as my phone buzzed. I already knew who it was before I looked. Mom, I need you to pick up a few things for me tomorrow. Just basics: milk, bread, eggs. Thanks. Can you? Now I appreciate it. Just do this. Like always. I turned my phone face down on the couch. I spent the next morning at the diner, scrubbing down tables while my mind churned. The conversation in the hospital played on repeat, each word digging deeper into my chest. She's too desperate to say no. She's the backup plan. She just keeps going, no matter what we throw at her. I had heard them say it with my own ears, and had listened to them laugh about me. And yet, a part of me was still hesitating. Why? What was I waiting for? Permission to be angry? A sign that walking away was the right thing to do? If I was waiting for them to suddenly realize my worth, I'd be waiting forever. You okay? I snapped out of my thoughts, blinking up at Tina, my manager. She was standing near the counter, watching me with a frown. I forced a smile. Yeah, just tired. She didn't look convinced. You've been scrubbing that table for 10 minutes. I glanced down. Sure enough, my rag was still moving in slow, absent-minded circles over the same clean spot. Tina sighed. Go take 5. I didn't argue. I grabbed a cup of coffee from the back and stepped outside into the cool morning air. The street was already busy, people rushing to work, horns blaring, life moving on as if nothing had changed. Except for me, everything had. I pulled out my phone. Mom's text was still there, unread. I hovered my thumb over the message, debating whether to answer. Then, almost without thinking, I did something I had never done before. I deleted it. I didn't reply. I didn't offer an excuse. I just let it go. And for the first time in my life, I felt something close to free. Of course, the silence didn't last. By the time my shift ended, I had 4 missed calls. 3 from Mom, 1 from Jenna. I ignored them. By the time I got home, there was a voicemail waiting for me. I hesitated before pressing play. Mom's voice came through, tight, with barely restrained irritation. I don't know what's going on with you, but you need to stop acting childish. I asked you to pick up a few things for me. I just got out of the hospital, and you can't be bothered to help your own mother? What is wrong with you? A pause. Then, the voice shifted, slipping into something more familiar. I know you're upset about something, but you need to grow up. Family takes care of each other. I took care of you, and now it's your turn. That's how this works. Call me back. The voicemail ended. I stared at my phone, my chest tight. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't apologize. She didn't even seem to realize that I had every reason to be angry. She just expected it. I set my phone down and walked to the window, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. Family takes care of each other. That was the line she always used. The line that had kept me tied to them for years. But the family wasn't supposed to use each other. Family wasn't supposed to laugh behind your back. Family wasn't supposed to make you feel like you only mattered when you were useful. I'd spent my whole life waiting for them to see me. To really see me. And I was finally starting to understand that they never would. The next day, I went about my routine as if nothing had changed. I worked my shift at the diner. I picked up extra hours. I went home. I didn't call her back. The texts kept coming though. First from Mom, then from Jenna. Then, finally, Ryan. Jenna, Mom says you're ignoring her. What's your problem? Ryan, she's your mother. You owe her. Owe her. I stared at the words for a long time before locking my phone and tossing it onto the counter. I was so tired, not just physically, emotionally. For so long, I had told myself that if I just did more, if I just proved myself, they would treat me the way I had always hoped they would. But that was never going to happen. They didn't respect me. They didn't love me. Not in the way that mattered. I sat down at the kitchen table, my hands folded in front of me, my heart pounding in my chest. I had a decision to make. A choice. And this time, for the first time in my life, I was going to make it for myself. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at the messages on my phone, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I'd spent my whole life being their safety net, their backup plan, the one who always fixed everything, who always sacrificed, who always came back. But I was done. And if they thought they could just demand my help, if they thought I was going to crawl back like I always did, they were in for a surprise. I started small. First, I blocked Ryan's number, then Jenna's, then finally my mother's. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't hesitate. I just did it. And for the first time in my life, I felt nothing. No guilt. No second thoughts. Just a quiet kind of satisfaction. But that was just the beginning. If they thought I was going to disappear quietly, they had another thing coming. The next day, I made a call. My landlord had already given me an out on my lease, but I still had a little time left before I had to move. And if I was going to leave, I was going to do it right. Hey, Mr. Calhoun, I said, forcing brightness into my voice. I was wondering if you'd be interested in a little business tip. There was a pause before he chuckled. That depends. What kind of tip? I leaned back against my couch, letting my voice drop into something softer, conspiratorial. Did you know my brother has been overcharging me on rent for years? The amusement vanished from his tone. Excuse me? I smiled. I checked your rental listings. This apartment is supposed to go for $1,100 a month, right? That's correct. Well, Ryan's been charging me $1,400. Silence. Then a sharp exhale. That little I thought you want to know? I continued, my voice as sweet as honey. Since, that means he's been pocketing an extra $300 a month without reporting it. And I know how strict the city is about rental fraud. Mr. Calhoun made a noise that was somewhere between a growl and a laugh. Oh, he's going to regret that. I could hear papers rustling, the sound of a keyboard clacking. Tell you what, he said, I'll be having a little conversation with your brother real soon. In the meantime, how about I waive your last month's rent as a thank you? I grinned. That's awfully generous of you. Consider it my way of making sure he learned a lesson. Oh, he was going to learn a lesson, all right. Next, I turned my attention to Jenna. She thought she could laugh at me, talk about me like I was some pathetic little charity case. Well, she was about to have a very bad week. Jenna worked as a social media manager for a local boutique, one of those places that thrived on their carefully curated online presence. And she had made a huge mistake. A few months ago, I had watched her log into her work Instagram account on my phone. She had forgotten to log out. I had never planned to do anything with that knowledge. But now I had a reason. I logged in and stared at the account for a moment. Then, slowly, methodically, I started deleting posts. Not all of them, just enough to make it look wrong. Then I scheduled a few posts for the next morning, complete with spelling errors, random hashtags, and an accidental upload of a blurry, unedited photo she had taken of herself in the bathroom mirror. It was just enough chaos to make her look incompetent. Then, as a finishing touch, I messaged her boss from the boutique's official account. Me, as Jenna Hay, just a heads up, I might need to take a break from running this account. I've been super overwhelmed, and I feel like I'm burning out. If you know anyone else who could help manage things for a while, that would be awesome. I logged out and let the dominoes fall. By the time I was packing up my last box a few days later, the damage had already started to spread. Ryan had blown up my email, since he couldn't call, ranting about how the landlord was threatening to take legal action against him. Apparently, he had forgotten to mention that the extra rent he was charging me wasn't just shady, it was illegal. Oops. Jenna had also tried to reach me, but I had ignored every message. From what I had seen online, her little social media stunt had not gone unnoticed. The boutique had posted a job listing for a replacement social media manager, which meant they had either fired her or were about to. I didn't feel bad, not even a little. As for my mother, well, I knew the silence from her wouldn't last. And sure enough, just as I was about to leave my apartment for the last time, I saw an email waiting for me. Subject: unbelievable. I opened it. Mom, so this is who you are now? You ignore your family. You ruin your brother's reputation. You sabotage your sister's job? For what? Some childish revenge? I hope you know what you've done. I hope you realize that after this, we're done. Don't come back looking for sympathy when you regret this. Don't expect forgiveness. I read the email twice. Then slowly I smiled. I typed out a response. Me, you always told me family takes care of each other. But you only meant that when I was the one doing the taking care. You never once thought about what I needed. You never once asked how I was doing. You laughed at me. You mocked me. You took advantage of me. And you expected me to come crawling back anyway. But here's the thing, Mom. You were right about one thing. We're done. I hit send. Then I grabbed my bags, locked the door behind me, and walked away for good.